What's going on, guys? My name is Triforce Addiction. Welcome back to another COD mode video. So today, this video is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to be critiquing some thoughts about, I guess, a fellow YouTuber's take on, I guess, the controller community for this game. I did already watch the video previously, so this is not going to be some sort of weird reaction, but I do want to highlight a lot of the points where I kind of feel like what he's saying is, how do I say this without sounding like a douche? Like, just really incorrect. Don't get me wrong, this guy isn't, malicious. He's not trying to steer people the wrong way, obviously. He has very good intentions from what it seems. And I don't want you guys to get the impression that I'm just trying to put this guy down or anything like that. But for a person that's played controller on this game as long as he has, I feel like I do need to kind of, I guess, correct him on certain things, because it is kind of concerning. So a day or two ago, he did make a video talking about if, controller players are actually important in COD Mobile. So that's a weird question to ask, or, that's like, it's a very difficult topic to actually discuss because, again, we're talking about, a mobile version of a Call of Duty game where it's basically implied that you pretty much have to play on a mobile device, tablet or phone, whatever the case may be. But man, some of the shit that he says is just not something I would I would ever say myself. Anyways, let's get into it because yeah, this is a very interesting video I'm gonna make.
Let's get into this video. So for today's video, I want to talk about why controller players are important. I know that if you don't think that controller players are important just because it's a mobile game, that's kind of crazy.
So Benny starts off by asking, of course, are controller players important? And of course, his stance is, yes, I think it's important, and I think it's a crazy thought to think otherwise. First off, I don't really think that's much of a crazy thought, mainly because back when the controller community started to actually grow, when I started facing more and more controller players over time, we were clowned on a lot for the basic fact of using a controller. I mean, even Bobby Plays in one of the tournament, well, not one of the tournament seasons, in one of the ranked seasons, found out that one of the top leaderboard players was actually a controller player. Of course, he had a lot of negative things to say. First off, I wouldn't actually do that. I wouldn't go into rank just to take a top 5,000 spot. I usually just go to get legendary and that's it. But I mean, yeah, like, is it really a crazy thought? I mean, obviously that guy who did that probably didn't give controller players a good first impression, especially at the time when, I mean, keep in mind, this was like around the time when COD Mobile was still in its first year. I mean, people that were playing touch were still trying to get their shit together. And at the time, I mean, using controller on a Call of Duty game, even for this, isn't necessarily that hard unless you're really trying to master your aim and movement in this game. I mean, given the limitations that controller players already do have. At the time, yeah, it felt like it was an unfair advantage. Of course, their opinions have changed over time. Of course, they don't really think that controller players are a very vital part of COD Mobile. Yes, it does make up I would say a decent chunk of the community, but not even close to being the majority. If anything, it's still a very strong minority. So yes, it was, I mean, finding controller players back then was pretty hard. I mean, most lobbies you'll get were bot lobbies. Of course, nowadays, I mean, every lobby that you get into, whether it be hardpoint kill confirmed, you are going to find controller players. But to say they are actually important to COD Mobile is a bit of an overstatement, I would say, because yeah, I mean, it's not like controller players were, the ones that were kind of advertising this game like crazy. I mean, yes, you would see some YouTubers from like the mainline CODs play this game for a little bit, but they would never really take it too seriously. They would tell players to at least try out the game, and that's basically it. But to say that they are like very important is kind of, yeah, like that's not something I would say. I would say just using controller is just an option if you don't feel like learning touch, and I'm one of those people. So yeah, I would get annihilated immediately if I tried using touch controls right now. I just like playing controller because it's basically the traditional way to play Call of Duty, even if it's an on mobile game.
Obviously, I have so many people that play on mobile, and a lot of them actually respect controller players. I think I feel like they understand that it's tough. It's more tough to play on a controller than it is on touch.
This one I agree with, and at the same time, I don't. I've seen players, I've tried to adjust to touch a few times before. I mean, there was a time when I guess controller support wasn't working on iPad. It was like one of those updates that started that bug, and I tried using touch, and it just never felt very right to me. I've tried for like a few days. I just couldn't get it right because the way that you move, comparing controller with touch is almost completely different. And that's why when I do play ranked for those rare moments, it's a little off-putting because yes, you're going against other players that move completely differently. But he is right when he says that it is a little tough to at least use a controller in this game. At first, it was different because, again, at the very beginning of this game, there wasn't, people were still getting used to playing on, touch controls. As for controller players, it was a lot easier, especially, like I said, if you were experienced. So at the time, using a controller was looked at as if it was an unfair advantage. But of course, now that, touch players have evolved far more than before, I could understand why he says that it's a little harder for controller players to go against touch players, given the disadvantages. So there are quite a bit of disadvantages, something I don't normally talk about because, I mean, really, who's going to listen to a controller player other than other controller players? But disadvantages includes, stuff like drop shotting, and that's something that you're not able to do because whenever you try to hold down B or the crouch button, it doesn't go down immediately. It takes like a second or two for you to finally go prone. And when you're using touch, obviously you could just go prone instantly. That's a huge advantage that touch players have over controller players. And keep in mind, when it comes to mouse and keyboard as well, they do have the ability to drop shot instantly. So controller players are the only type of players that are not actually able to drop shot. Not only that, the aim assist as well as how aiming works in this game, given that there's nothing that you could really do about dead zones with controllers. Keep in mind, the Xbox and the PlayStation are the two controllers that have a pretty massive amount of dead zones. So you kind of have to compensate, especially if you are used to playing Call of Duty on console where it's very fluid. It's not the same here. You kind of have to adjust to how the aim assist works, and this is something that even for me, it's very hard to master at times. You see, the game is actually designed more for touch players. Even the aim assist, I would say, is more for touch players. So we kind of have to play controller while at the same time the game is being designed for touch players. I don't know if that actually makes sense, but yeah, that's the best way I could actually explain it. But trust me, going back to console and to this game is a very weird experience. There were times where I've went to play Modern Warfare 2 or some other console Call of Duty game, and when I come back to play this one, it's very hard to readjust because this game is very different. So I do actually agree with him there because, yes, it is very difficult. And as it goes for controller players being respected by touch players, it really depends on the touch player themselves because, yes, I'm sure people still have, hold like those little negative thoughts about controller players. Trust me, like I think even today, like I still face that type of stuff now. But I would say that I think, the touch community, I guess the majority of the COD Mobile players have been a little bit more open to facing controller players. I mean, you see Bobby Plays and other YouTubers on Twitter say, will ask the community if they would like some sort of option enabled in ranked to play with controller players. So I do agree with them a little bit there as well. Touch players don't really have those same hostile feelings towards controller players anymore. I would say probably mainly because, I mean, the player base is divided. If you're playing with touch players, you're only going to play with touch players unless maybe there's a person in the enemy team that might have a different type of input. But for the most part, we're never really against each other at all times. So I think that's why they don't have really that much negative opinions about it. Again, keep in mind, most of us are still kind of separated unless we're playing BR. Or if they're using the glitch to get into ranked to get legendary. And keep in mind, I don't think the majority of the controller community is actually doing that.
Brings in a lot of people. I don't think COD Mobile, in my opinion, I don't think that COD Mobile would be where it is right now without controller players.
Okay, even as a controller player for 4 years at this point, that is probably one of the dumbest statements I've heard from a controller player. We have not made that much of an impact to COD Mobile. Like the fact that you say that COD Mobile wouldn't be where it is right now if it wasn't for controller players is like probably one of the biggest fucking insults that you could make to those who don't actually play controller and just play the game normally. And I'm actually genuinely like telling the truth here. I mean, really, name any pro player that uses a controller in any of the mobile pro teams. You can't, because they don't fucking exist. Let me put it to you this way. So yes, it's nice that we do have controller support in this fucking game, but to say that we are one of the main reasons as to why this game has been growing is not really the truth at all. I mean, like, we were not really involved in any of the major events. I could literally take a time machine and go to the past and ask one of the devs from that time and tell them to not add controller support, and I come back to the present, the whole timeline would be unchanged. Basically, what I'm saying is that with or without controller support, nothing would have been different. The game would still be the way that it is today. Even for me, I've been making YouTube videos on this game for 3.5 years, if not more, and even I don't really think I've made much of a difference. I may have inspired a few people to start using controller, or to at least try it, but even then, the numbers are so low, like, yeah, like, it wouldn't have made any difference otherwise. But saying that controller players, like, is basically what made COD Mobile, better, is not something I would sit well with. It's like if you had to team up with a few kids in a group class project, and you and you're the one that put in like the least amount of effort, but you still take like full credit for it. It doesn't work that way.
People come from COD Mobile and they start playing with a controller, they realize, it's not that great. You have disadvantages. So I feel like they do that on purpose, though. So a lot of those players will play on touch.
This statement I actually do agree with, mainly because if you go to like other mobile games, they have far more adjustment options for controller usage. In this game, if you go into like the touch settings, you have the ability to change sensitivity for every type of scope that there is in this game, 3 times, 4 times, 6 times scopes. Like, you could all change the sensitivity individually, but for controller players, you don't really have that ability at all. If you use a 6 times scope or anything that's above a 3 times scope for, let's say, an assault rifle, you are going to have to deal with whatever built-in sensitivity there is for that set scope. Luckily, this game is very iron sight friendly, so I don't really care whether or not they actually add those sensitivity options. But yeah, it is kind of like one of those discrepancies that like kind of goes like unchecked for a very long time. And don't get me wrong, whenever there's like a new streak, or there's like a weapon that requires some sort of different type of thing to do with the controller, they do have options to kind of help with that. For example, if you use a taser for the Pharaoh, you do have an option to press on the lower D-pad to switch to that taser. I mean, they do stuff like that. Even when it comes to the Shock RC, you're actually able to just press the trigger button to just break out of it easily. But my main problem stems from the fact that there's not a lot of other options like sensitivity options or the ability to map out your buttons like other games do. And another critical issue is the fact that there's no option to at least lower your dead zone. You notice it a lot when you use the Xbox controller as well as the PlayStation controller, but the reason why I use the Switch controller a lot more often now is mainly the fact that it's the one that has like the least amount of dead zone. That's like the only issue to really mitigate any form of dead zone. Also, I do agree and also a little bit disagree when it comes to the fact that he thinks that COD Mobile keeps the controllers that way, or they keep them handicapped in order for them to move onto touchscreen, which, let's be honest, again, we are all separated. We only go against players with the same input. So feeling that disadvantage is extremely rare unless you're playing ranked or playing BR. So even if it's true, most players don't care. And keep in mind, the skill gap isn't really that massive. It's like when you're at a disadvantage, it's not like a major disadvantage to the point where like there's nothing that you can do to even stop them. It's not like that. But I will say this, I've seen a lot of YouTubers like bashing controllers. They've tried it. They tried using it themselves. And some of them have some pretty good experiences, they don't take it seriously, but their experience with it is more or less good. But the one that caught me by surprise by a lot, or like the one that was really off-putting, was definitely when Ferg tried to use a controller. I saw that video and it looked like a toddler was trying to learn how to play Call of Duty. That's literally how it looked. And don't get me wrong, like I said, the controller, using a controller in this game is pretty hard because, you're kind of like, you have to deal with the movement that's built for, touch players as well as the aim assist. But the way that he was playing, it just like, I understand it's hard, but it's not that hard. Like the way he was moving, he was just like all over the place. And I felt like he was doing that shit on purpose to have players steer more to mobile instead of, controllers. So there is a little bit of truth to that. I will say that. And let me preface this by, like, before I move on, I'm not saying that Ferg is like absolute shit with the controller. Like, I don't believe that. Like, I think he was making the controller seem worse than what it actually is. I think that's what was going on. Call me a conspiracy theorist all you want. That's what I believe.
Touch players, and I think sometimes you'll play against touch players on pub matches, but on ranked, you can't even find matches after like Grandmaster, and it takes a very long time. And maybe like on the weekends you'll find a game or two, but
Okay, I think any controller player could actually agree. Like once you make it to master or grandmaster, it gets way harder finding matches, and that's of course because we're still separated during that time. So, yeah, we're only going against other controller players. So yeah, the player base is not as really as big as you think. Yes, it's nice that we get to go up even further, but again, it's still like, and it just goes back to saying that controller players are the reason why COD Mobile is the way it is. It's not true. I mean, if you can't even find a match to even get to legendary, that should tell you something. Really, the only way to get to legendary in ranked is just to do the glitch. As for PC players, I'm not really that sure how that works. Maybe they do get to play with touch players, because I've seen like a lot of PC players for some reason be able to get to legendary immediately. Maybe they're doing the glitch too, but I wouldn't know how that works on PC. Probably might work the same. I don't know. But yeah, they could do it pretty easily. But again, I mean, there have been a lot of debates whether or not controller players should actually play against touch players, especially now since, the touch community is a lot more, refined. They already know how to play perfectly. I think it's, I think it would be a good idea, just like maybe have like a whole, just, I think a ranked season to see how that goes. And if people don't like it, they could just take the option off, or they could just remove that feature from the game. I mean, I would love to see something like that. But I'll tell you this, if they don't like it, it's probably not even going to be because of the controller players. I would say it's probably going to be because of the mouse and keyboard players. If you think controllers players are crazy, you have not met my friend Onyx. Keep in mind, he does have a gaming PC, and he does play this game on PC, and he's very well skilled. So, I mean, it's safe to assume that he's played other Call of Duty games on PC, so he probably has that, like, that prior experience. But trust me, when tournament mode became noob friendly, or I guess before the time it became noob friendly when it was a lot more competitive, playing free for all against other players, he was always like number one for like every fucking like week. So yeah, this guy was a monster.
I don't like that about that. Like, I'm really hoping that Warzone Mobile will step up and do the right thing and just allow us to play with whoever, especially in pub matches. I don't think they should have, controller players play controller players or mobile players play mobile players. I feel like that's not the right way to go, especially because there's no free COD in console or PC, or like multiplayer, type games. Just because like, Warzone is fun, but you have to have a really good console or a really good PC to be playing those type of games, or you won't have that much fun. So
Whether or not Warzone Mobile will actually step up and do the right thing, as you say, I mean, that remains to be seen, for sure. I haven't really seen a lot of controller options. Maybe they do have dead zone options and better sensitivity settings, which I no doubt think that they will have. I've already seen controller support for the game, and it looks pretty nice. Of course, once the game comes out, I'm gonna have to see for myself. But as for all of us playing together, again, I'm not really sure how most of the community is gonna feel about that. Of course, with the regular Warzone, you have crossplay between PC, PS4, and Xbox Series. But the thing is that there's always been heated debate. There's always been a lot of PC players saying that controller players have a lot more advantages because they have stronger aim assist, while PC players don't have aim assist at all. I think the only issue, if this were to happen, I think the only issue that would really be mitigated is the fact that there would not really be that many hackers, since everyone's just playing on a mobile device. I know there will be some, maybe some Android users gonna probably like find a way to like add wall hacks or some bullshit like that. But I know a lot of the hacking situation would have been alleviated from Warzone had PC not been involved in that game alongside console. And I don't mean like take Warzone out of PC completely. I mean they could play with their own players, but the thing is that the hacking situation was really bad at the time because of them. And you could argue that yeah, on console they had the Chronos Zen, but I mean keep in mind it did not give you wall hacks or anything like that, or the ability to just fire anywhere into the sky and still kill people with like pure headshots. I'm not saying it should be allowed, but you guys get the point, right? To add more context to his video, he did say that, I mean, all players should be able to play the way that they want without any judgment. I mean, that's basically the whole message that he was trying to convey to his audience. And I do agree. I mean, he doesn't really seem like a douchey person. He seems very genuine. And yeah, I mean, that's all he really has to say about the video. But the reason why I made this is the fact that he said that the COD Mobile would not be here or not be the way that it is if it wasn't for controller players. I wanted to correct that mainly because if let's say a YouTuber, like let's say Ferg or someone big comes across that video and sees that, it's gonna put controller players in a very bad light because now they're gonna think, wow, is that really how controller players feel about this game? Like I just don't want to see more hostility between people with different inputs. I mean, you have people like Stealth COD Mobile getting shit just for stating a simple fact that iPad players do have a bigger advantage over phone players. I mean, like, I think honestly anyone with a brain would agree with that, right? But he was getting so much shit because of it. I mean, there's already that debate with iPad versus phones. I mean, let's just settle that fucking argument, okay? Like, if iPads weren't such a huge advantage, then why aren't pro players allowed to use them? Like, what else can you say about that? There, argument settled. We can move on. But yeah, anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave a like. Make sure to subscribe for some more COD Mobile content. And I'll see you guys next time.